Marcus Chen had seen worse explosions during his time as a military engineer, but this one felt different. The Caltharian mining facility shook violently as another blast echoed through the corridors. Emergency lights flickered red against the metallic walls, casting eerie shadows that danced with each tremor. He pressed his back against the cold wall, checking his oxygen levels. 30 minutes left in his suit. The diplomatic mission to establish mining rights on Calthar 7 had turned into a nightmare when separatist forces attacked the facility. Now he was trapped 3 levels underground with no way to reach the evacuation shuttles. A soft whimper caught his attention. Marcus turned toward the sound, his helmet lights cutting through the smoke-filled corridor. There, huddled behind a pile of debris, was a small figure. As he moved closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a Caltharian child, probably no more than 12 in human years. Her pale blue skin was streaked with dust and tears, and her large violet eyes stared at him with a mixture of fear and hope. The Caltharians were known for their fragile bone structure and delicate features, making them look almost ethereal. This little girl looked like she might break if touched too roughly. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, switching his translator to Caltharian. "Are you hurt?" The girl shook her head, her silver hair catching the emergency lights. She tried to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. Marcus could see she was terrified, probably separated from her family during the chaos. Another explosion rocked the facility, much closer this time. Chunks of ceiling rained down around them, and Marcus instinctively moved toward the child. That's when he saw it. A massive section of the roof directly above them was cracking, stress fractures spreading like spider webs across the metal. The girl saw it too. Her eyes went wide with terror as she pointed upward. Marcus didn't hesitate. He dove forward, wrapping his arms around the small Caltharian just as the ceiling gave way. The world exploded into chaos. Metal fragments, concrete chunks, and jagged pieces of debris came crashing down. Marcus felt sharp edges slice through his environmental suit as he curled his body around the child, using himself as a human shield. Pain shot through his back and shoulders as shrapnel found its mark, but he held on tight. The noise was deafening, grinding metal, crashing concrete, and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. Marcus felt his suit's pressure seals fail in multiple places. His oxygen alarm started blaring, but he couldn't let go. The little girl's safety was all that mattered now. When the dust finally settled, Marcus found himself lying on his side, still wrapped protectively around the Caltharian child. She was unconscious, but breathing, her small chest rising and falling steadily. His own breathing was labored, and he could taste blood in his mouth. Marcus tried to move and immediately regretted it. Sharp pain shot through his entire body. His left arm felt wrong, probably broken. His back was on fire where the shrapnel had hit. But the worst part was his failing life support system. Multiple breach warnings flashed across his helmet display, and his remaining oxygen was leaking fast. He looked down at the child in his arms. She was so small, so fragile. The Caltharians were known for their advanced technology and peaceful nature, but physically they were no match for humans. This little girl would have been crushed instantly if he hadn't acted. Marcus reached for his emergency beacon with his good arm. He managed to activate it before his vision started to blur. The loss of oxygen and blood loss were taking their toll. He felt himself getting drowsy, which he knew was dangerous. "Stay awake," he mumbled to himself, but his eyelids felt heavy. Stay awake for her. The last thing Marcus remembered was the sound of approaching footsteps and voices speaking in rapid Caltharian. Someone was shouting orders, and he felt hands carefully lifting the child from his arms. He tried to speak, to make sure they knew the girl was injured, but darkness was already pulling him under. As consciousness faded, Marcus felt a strange warmth wash over him. It wasn't the warmth of blood loss or shock. This was different. It felt almost like energy flowing through his body, but that was impossible. His last coherent thought was wondering if the child would be okay. The rescue team found them an hour later. Marcus Chen, human diplomatic attaché, unconscious and barely alive from his injuries. The Caltharian child, identified as Lyra Vexhai, daughter of the facility's chief engineer, was miraculously unharmed except for minor scratches. What the rescue team couldn't explain was why Marcus's wounds had stopped bleeding on their own, or why his vital signs remained stable despite the severity of his injuries. The medical readings made no sense according to human physiology. They rushed both of them to the facility's medical bay, where Dr. Zethron, the lead Caltharian physician, immediately began working on Marcus. The human's injuries were severe but not life-threatening, which was puzzling given what the rescue team had described. "His cellular regeneration is accelerated," Dr. Zethron muttered to his assistant. "This is not normal for human biology." Meanwhile, young Lyra had regained consciousness and was asking about the brave human who saved her. When they told her his name was Marcus, she insisted on staying in the medical bay until he woke up. Hours passed. The facility's emergency was over, the separatist forces had been driven off, and most of the wounded had been treated. But Marcus Chen remained unconscious, his body healing at an unusually rapid rate that baffled the medical staff. Dr. Zethron ran test after test, but the results only raised more questions. Marcus's blood showed trace amounts of an unknown energy signature, something the doctor had never encountered in human physiology. As the night wore on, Lyra fell asleep in a chair beside Marcus's bed, her small hand resting near his. The medical monitors showed stable vital signs for both patients. But Dr. Zethron noticed something odd. Whenever the child moved closer to Marcus, his healing rate seemed to increase slightly. It was probably just a coincidence, the doctor thought. But as a scientist, he couldn't ignore the correlation. He made a note in his files to investigate further once his patient was awake. Outside the medical bay, word of Marcus's heroic act was already spreading through the facility. The human who had risked everything to save a Caltharian child, using his own body as a shield against tons of falling debris. It was exactly the kind of story that could change the relationship between their species. Ambassador Telquin, the chief Caltharian diplomat, arrived at the medical bay just before dawn. She had been briefed on the incident and wanted to personally thank the human who had saved one of their children. "How is he?" she asked Dr. Zethron quietly. "Stable, but his recovery is unusual. I've never seen anything like it." The ambassador studied Marcus's sleeping form. There were already stories among her people about humans and their incredible capacity for selfless acts. This incident would only add to that growing legend. "And the child?" "Completely unharmed. She refuses to leave his side." Ambassador Telquin nodded thoughtfully. She had a feeling this was just the beginning of something much larger. The bond between this human and Caltharian child might be more significant than anyone realized. As the first light of Calthar VII's twin suns filtered through the medical bay windows, Marcus Chen began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, immediately focusing on the small figure sleeping in the chair beside his bed. Lyra was awake in an instant, her violet eyes bright with relief and something else. Something that looked almost like recognition, as if she had been waiting for him to wake up for much longer than just one night. "You saved me," she said softly in perfect English, though Marcus was certain she had only spoken Caltharian before the accident. Marcus tried to sit up and was surprised to find he could do so without the excruciating pain he expected. His body felt different somehow, stronger and more alive than it had in years. "Are you okay?" he asked, reaching out to gently check if she was really unhurt. The moment his fingers touched her small hand, Marcus felt it again. That strange warmth, that flow of energy, but this time he was awake to experience it fully. It wasn't just warmth, it was something far more profound. Dr. Zethron chose that moment to enter the room, and his eyes widened at what he saw. Both Marcus and Lyra were glowing with a soft, barely visible aura of energy. It lasted only a few seconds before fading, but it was unmistakable. The doctor's mind raced with possibilities. In all his years of study, he had only read about such phenomena in ancient Caltharian texts, stories dismissed as mythology by modern science. But the evidence was right in front of him. Somehow, this human and Caltharian child had formed a bond that transcended normal biological understanding. Marcus's sacrifice had triggered something that shouldn't have been possible between their species. As Dr. Zethran watched, Marcus and Lyra continued to hold hands, both seeming completely unaware of the extraordinary nature of what had just occurred. They were simply two beings who had found each other in the midst of chaos and formed a connection that would change everything. 3 days had passed since the incident, and Marcus felt better than he had in his entire adult life. The doctors claimed it was impossible, but his injuries had healed completely. No scars, no lingering pain, nothing to indicate he had been crushed under tons of debris just days ago. Lyra hadn't left his side except when forced to by the medical staff. She followed him around the facility like a devoted shadow, chattering away in a mixture of English and Caltharian that she seemed to switch between without thinking. The strangest part was that Marcus understood every word, even when she spoke her native language. "This shouldn't be happening," Dr. Zethran explained to Ambassador Telquin as they watched Marcus and Lyra through the observation window. "Humans don't naturally learn Caltharian linguistic patterns, and our children certainly don't acquire human languages this quickly." The ambassador studied the pair with intense curiosity. Marcus was teaching Lyra how to play a simple card game, and she was laughing at his terrible pronunciation of Caltharian numbers. They looked like they had known each other for years, rather than days. "What do the ancient texts say about bonding?" Telquin asked. Dr. Zethron shifted uncomfortably. "The old stories speak of soul bonds, connections between beings that transcend physical limitations. But those are myths, legends from before we developed modern science." "Are they?" The ambassador watched as Marcus helped Lyra reach something on a high shelf, and both of them glowed briefly with that same soft energy. "Look at them, Doctor. Look at the evidence." Meanwhile, Marcus was becoming aware that something fundamental had changed in his perception of the world. Colors seemed brighter, sounds were clearer, and he could sense things that had no rational explanation. Most notably, he could feel Lyra's emotions as if they were his own. When she was happy, warmth spread through his chest. When she was worried about something, he felt a knot in his stomach. It should have been disturbing, but instead it felt completely natural, like a missing piece of himself had finally been found. "Mr. Chen," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Marcus turned to see a tall Caltharian male approaching with purposeful strides. The alien's bearing and expensive clothing suggested high rank. "I am Engineer Vexhai, Lyra's father," the Caltharian said formally. "I owe you a debt that can never be repaid." Marcus stood respectfully, gently guiding Lyra to stand beside him. "Any decent person would have done the same thing, sir. She's your daughter. I couldn't let her get hurt." Engineer Vexhai studied Marcus with keen intelligence. "Perhaps, but not everyone would have succeeded in protecting her. Our preliminary analysis of the debris field shows that the impact should have been fatal for both of you. Lucky, I guess. Luck had nothing to do with it." Vexahai's violet eyes, so similar to his daughter's, fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "My daughter tells me she can feel your thoughts sometimes. She says you saved her not just with your body, but with your soul." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "She's just a kid." Kids say things. Caltharian children are remarkably perceptive about energy patterns, Vex High continued. Lyra claims you two are connected in a way she doesn't understand, but that feels right to her. I'm beginning to think she may be correct. Before Marcus could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor as a voice announced in both languages, "All personnel to emergency stations. Unknown vessels approaching. This is not a drill." Engineer Vex High's expression turned grim. "The Separatists must be returning. Mr. Chen, I need to get to the command center. Will you—" "I'll watch Lyra," Marcus said immediately. The little girl had moved closer to him, and he could feel her fear through their strange connection. "Thank you." Vex High knelt and hugged his daughter tightly. "Stay with Marcus, little star. He'll keep you safe." As the engineer rushed away, Marcus looked down at Lyra. Her violet eyes were wide with worry, and he felt her anxiety as strongly as his own. "It's going to be okay," he told her, though he wasn't sure he believed it himself. "Let's get to the emergency shelter." They joined the stream of facility personnel heading toward the reinforced safe rooms deeper in the complex. Marcus noticed how the other Caltharians looked at him, not with suspicion or fear, but with something approaching reverence. Word of his sacrifice had clearly spread throughout the facility. The emergency shelter was a vast underground chamber designed to protect the facility's population during attacks. Hundreds of Caltharians huddled together, their pale blue faces etched with worry as status reports crackled over the communication system. Marcus found a spot along one wall and settled down with Lyra pressed against his side. Through the connection they shared, he could feel not just her emotions, but glimpses of something else, flashes of knowledge or memory that definitely weren't his own. Images flickered through his mind, ancient Caltharian ceremonies, symbols carved in stone, and most strangely, other pairs like them throughout history. Humans and Caltharians connected by bonds that defied explanation, working together to accomplish impossible things. "Do you see it too?" Lyra whispered, looking up at him with those unnaturally perceptive eyes. "See what?" "The memories, the old stories. They're not just stories, are they?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "I don't know what you mean." But he did know. Deep down, he understood that what was happening to them had occurred before, throughout the history of both their species. The bond they shared was rare, but not unique. It was something that had been forgotten by modern science, but remembered in myth and legend. The communication system crackled with an update. "Enemy vessels have bypassed our outer defenses. All combat personnel report to stations. Estimated time to attack, 15 minutes. A murmur of fear rippled through the shelter. Marcus could feel the collective anxiety of hundreds of Caltharians pressing against his consciousness. Their terror was overwhelming, threatening to drown out his own thoughts. But then Lyra's small hand found his, and suddenly everything changed. The fear didn't disappear, but it became manageable. More than that, Marcus felt something new flowing through the connection. Strength, determination, and an unshakable certainty that they would survive this. "You feel it now, don't you?" Lyra said softly. "The old power. My people have been waiting for it to return." Around them, other Caltharians had begun to notice the change. The suffocating atmosphere of panic was lifting, replaced by something Marcus could only describe as hope. Somehow, their bond was affecting everyone in the shelter, radiating calm and confidence in ever-widening circles. Dr. Zethran pushed through the crowd toward them, his eyes wide with amazement. "Incredible," he breathed. "The energy readings in this chamber have completely stabilized. It's centered on you two." Marcus looked around and realized the doctor was right. The Caltharians near them had stopped crying, stopped panicking. Children who had been sobbing were now quiet, and adults who had been near hysteria were standing straighter. their faces set with determination. "What's happening to us?" Marcus asked. "Something wonderful," came a new voice. Ambassador Telquin approached, her expression mixing awe with deep satisfaction. "Something our people have legends about, but never dared to hope for." Before she could explain further, the facility shuddered under the impact of enemy fire. The lights flickered, and dust rained from the ceiling. But instead of screaming, the Caltharians in the shelter began to move with purpose. Engineers started checking structural integrity. Security personnel organized evacuation routes. Medical staff prepared emergency supplies. It was as if the paralyzing fear had been replaced by calm efficiency. "This is what the legends speak of," Telkin continued, having to raise her voice over the sound of another impact. "The old bonds between our species. When human determination merges with Caltharian wisdom, both become stronger than either could be alone." Marcus felt it now, not just Lyra's thoughts and emotions, but glimpses of the vast network of knowledge that connected all Caltharians. Their species didn't just share information through technology. They had an inherent psychic link that allowed for rapid communication and problem-solving. And somehow, his bond with Lyra was giving him access to that network. Information flowed through his mind. Structural weak points in the facility, hidden escape routes, the exact positioning of the attacking ships. The Caltharians around them were unconsciously sharing their expertise through the psychic link that his presence was amplifying. "The Emergency Command Center," Marcus said suddenly, the words coming from knowledge he shouldn't possess. "There's a backup system that can redirect the shields, but it needs someone who can interface with both human and Caltharian technology." Ambassador Telquin's eyes widened. "That's impossible. Our technologies are completely incompatible." "Not anymore." Marcus stood, helping Lyra to her feet. Through their connection, he could see exactly what needed to be done. "I think that's the point of this bond. We can bridge the gap between our species." Another massive impact shook the facility, and this time the lights went out completely. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the message was clear. The shields were failing. "The command center is 3 levels up," Dr. Zethran said. "The corridors will be filled with toxic gas from the damaged atmospheric processors. It's suicide." Marcus looked down at Lyra, who nodded with a maturity far beyond her years. "We can do it," she said simply. "Together." Around them, the Caltharians were already moving to clear a path, not because they had been ordered to, but because they could sense through the psychic network that this was their best chance for survival. As Marcus and Lyra prepared to leave the shelter, Ambassador Telquin caught his arm. "If you're right about this bond, about what it means for our species—" "One crisis at a time," Marcus replied, though he understood what she was implying. If they survived this, everything would change between humans and Caltharians. The foundation for true cooperation, even unity, might finally exist. He squeezed Lyra's hand, and together they headed toward the emergency exit. Behind them, hundreds of Caltharians watched with hope and faith, their fear replaced by the unshakable belief that these two unlikely heroes would find a way to save them all. The corridor beyond the shelter was a nightmare of sparking cables, broken pipes leaking various gases, and debris from repeated impacts. But Marcus could see the path through Lyra's enhanced perception, and she could feel his determination giving her courage. Together, they began their climb toward the command center, carrying the hopes of everyone they left behind. The emergency command center looked like a war zone. Sparking control panels cast erratic shadows on the walls, and the acrid smell of burned electronics filled the air. Several Caltharian technicians lay unconscious near their stations, overcome by toxic fumes from the damaged atmospheric systems. Marcus pulled his makeshift breathing mask tighter and checked on Lyra. The little girl had fashioned a filter from torn fabric and seemed to be handling the contaminated air better than he was. Through their bond, he could feel her drawing on some inner reserve of strength that amazed him. The main console, Lyra pointed to a complex array of crystalline interfaces that pulsed with dying energy. Papa showed me how it works, but I'm not big enough to reach all the controls at once. Marcus studied the alien technology, and through their connection, Lyra's memories of her father's explanations flowed into his mind. The Caltharian control systems were based on harmonic frequencies and bioelectric fields rather than simple mechanical input. A single operator needed to maintain contact with multiple interface points simultaneously while modulating their neural output to match the required frequencies. It's designed for adult Caltharian physiology, Marcus realized. Your people have longer arms and different neural patterns than humans. But we're connected now, Lyra said with absolute confidence. You have human strength and reach. I have Caltharian interface ability. Together we can make it work. Another explosion rocked the facility, closer than before. Through the damaged communication system, they could hear Engineer Vexhi's voice coordinating the defense. Shield generators at 30% and falling. We need those backup systems online now. Marcus positioned himself at the main console, while Lyra stood behind him. She placed her small hands on his shoulders, and immediately the strange energy flowed between them more strongly than ever before. The world seemed to shift, and suddenly, Marcus could perceive the facility's entire technological network as a living organism of light and energy. Feel for the shield harmonics, Lyra whispered, her voice seeming to come from inside his own mind. The frequency is like a song that needs to be sung correctly. Marcus reached out to the crystal interfaces, and the moment his fingers made contact, he gasped. Information flowed directly into his consciousness. Not as data, but as pure understanding. He could sense every system in the facility, every power conduit, every damaged component that was struggling to function. The shield generators were indeed failing, but there was another way. The facility's original designers had built redundant systems using different technology. Hidden beneath the main power grid was an older network based on quantum resonance, rather than conventional energy manipulation. I can see it, Marcus breathed. There's a backup system, but it's been disconnected for decades. The ancient network, Lyra's mental voice confirmed. Papa told me stories about it. It was built using the old knowledge, before my people forgot how to bond with others. Working together, they began the delicate process of reactivating systems that hadn't been used in generations. Marcus's human determination provided the raw willpower needed to force connections between incompatible technologies, while Lyra's Caltharian sensitivity allowed them to fine-tune the quantum resonances without causing catastrophic feedback. Above them, the battle was intensifying. The separatist forces had breached the outer defenses and were now conducting targeted strikes against critical infrastructure. But as Marcus and Lyra worked, something extraordinary began to happen. The facility's defensive systems didn't just come back online, they evolved. Human tactical thinking merged with Caltharian technological innovation, creating hybrid solutions that neither species could have developed alone. Shield frequencies adapted in real time to counter enemy weapons. Power routing became fluid and responsive rather than static. Even the damaged atmospheric processors began regenerating using protocols that combined human redundancy concepts with Caltharian biological integration. Impossible, came Engineer Vexhi's voice over the communication system. Our defensive capabilities just increased by 400%. Readings show systems I've never seen before. Marcus felt a smile tug at his lips. Through the facility's sensor network, he could perceive the enemy ship's confusion as their supposedly easy target suddenly became a formidable opponent. Weapons that should have penetrated the shields were being deflected. Electronic warfare attacks were being not just repelled, but turned back against their sources. but the effort was taking its toll. Marcus could feel his strength being drained as he maintained the connection between disparate systems. Beside him, Lyra was glowing with an increasingly bright energy aura, her small body channeling forces far beyond what should have been safe. "We can't keep this up much longer," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "We don't have to," Lyra replied, and her mental voice carried a note of excitement. "Look!" Through the sensor network, Marcus saw them, human ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The distress signal from the facility had finally reached a human patrol fleet, and now a dozen warships were accelerating toward Calthar 7. But more importantly, the demonstration of human-Caltharian cooperation had not gone unnoticed by the separatist forces. Their attack had been based on the assumption that the two species could never truly work together, that any alliance would be superficial and easily broken under pressure. Instead, they had witnessed something that challenged their entire ideology. The facility hadn't just survived their assault, it had become stronger through the crisis. Human and Caltharian working in perfect harmony, their combined capabilities exceeding what either could achieve alone. One by one, the separatist ships began to withdraw, not because they were outgunned, though the approaching human fleet certainly helped, but because their fundamental beliefs about the impossibility of true cooperation had been shattered. Marcus gradually reduced his contact with the control systems, feeling the immediate crisis pass. The facility's defenses remained active, but they no longer required constant manual intervention. The hybrid systems he and Lyra had created were learning, adapting, becoming self-sufficient. "It's over," he said, slumping against the console in exhaustion. Lyra moved to stand in front of him, her violet eyes bright with triumph and something deeper. "No," she said softly. "It's just beginning." Over the following hours, as the human fleet secured the system and the immediate danger passed, word of what had happened in the command center spread rapidly. Engineer Vex High arrived to find his daughter and the human who had saved her standing amid control systems that displayed capabilities decades ahead of current technology. "How is this possible?" he asked, studying the readings in amazement. "The old bonds," Ambassador Telquin said as she entered the command center. "The legends speak of times when our species worked as one, when human passion merged with Caltharian wisdom to achieve impossible things. We thought those stories were mythology." Dr. Zethron appeared behind the ambassador, carrying a portable scanner that was beeping frantically. "The energy readings from these two are off any known scale, but more importantly, the quantum resonance patterns they established are stable. The systems they created will continue to function and evolve." Marcus looked around at the alien faces surrounding them, all filled with wonder and hope. "What happens now?" "Now," said a new voice from the entrance. "We have some very interesting conversations ahead of us." Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus despite the shared surname, strode into the command center accompanied by several human officers. Her eyes immediately found Marcus and Lyra, studying them with keen interest. "Lieutenant Chen," she said formally, though Marcus hadn't held military rank in years. "I've been receiving some very unusual reports about the capabilities you've demonstrated here." "Admiral." "I'm not military anymore." "You are now." Her smile was slight but genuine. "What you and this young lady have accomplished here represents the most significant breakthrough in human-Caltharian relations since first contact. Both our governments are very interested in understanding how this bond works and what it means for the future." Ambassador Telquin stepped forward. "Admiral Chen, if I may. What has occurred here transcends simple diplomatic relations. These two have proven that true unity between our species is possible. The implications are staggering. Which is why," the Admiral continued, "both Earth Government and the Caltharian Council have authorized the immediate establishment of a joint research station. We need to understand this phenomenon, learn how to replicate it, and explore its potential applications. Marcus felt a moment of panic. You want to study us like lab specimens? We want to learn from you, Engineer Vexhai interjected firmly. My daughter is not going to become an experiment for anyone. Admiral Chen raised her hands peacefully. Nobody is going to be forced into anything, but the potential benefits for both our species are enormous. Imagine starships that combine human engineering with Caltharian quantum technology, medical advances that merge human resilience with Caltharian biological understanding, scientific breakthroughs that neither species could achieve alone. Through their bond, Marcus felt Lyra's excitement at the possibilities. She was young enough to see opportunity where adults saw complications. We'll do it, Lyra said suddenly, speaking for both of them. But we stay together, and we help decide how the research proceeds. Marcus looked down at her in surprise, then realized she was right. They were partners in this, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Agreed, Admiral Chen said immediately. You'll both be assigned to the Joint Research Station as senior consultants. Full autonomy over your participation, generous compensation, and the best support both our governments can provide. As the details were worked out around them, Marcus found himself thinking about the strange path that had brought him to this moment. A simple diplomatic mission had turned into something that might change the course of history for two species. No regrets? Lyra asked softly, her mental voice tinged with concern. Marcus looked down at the remarkable little girl who had become the most important person in his life. The bond between them was still mysterious, still developing, but it felt more real than anything he had ever experienced. None at all, he replied, both aloud and through their connection. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the observation deck of the Joint Research Station orbiting Calthar 7, watching as the first prototype vessel incorporating human Caltharian hybrid technology completed its maiden voyage. The ship moved through space with a grace that pure human engineering could never have achieved, while incorporating defensive systems more robust than anything the Caltharians could have built alone. Beside him, Lyra had grown several inches and was reading technical manuals that would have challenged most adult engineers. Their bond had deepened and stabilized, creating a permanent bridge between human and Caltharian consciousness that both species were still struggling to understand. The Council has approved funding for 12 more research pairs, she reported, not looking up from her data pad. They found 6 compatible human Caltharian matches in the initial screening. Marcus smiled. What had begun as a single act of heroism was becoming a new chapter in the history of both species. The separatist movement had collapsed as more examples of successful cooperation emerged. Trade agreements had evolved into genuine partnerships. Most remarkably, a new generation of children was growing up with the understanding that humans and Caltharians were meant to work together. Happy with how things turned out? Marcus asked. Lyra finally looked up from her reading, her violet eyes sparkling with mischief. Well, you did save my life. I suppose that worked out pretty well. Marcus laughed, remembering the terrified little girl he had shielded from falling debris. That moment of pure instinct had set in motion changes that would ripple across the galaxy for generations to come. Through the bond they shared, he could feel her contentment and excitement for the future. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Human and Caltharian, two species learning to become something greater than the sum of their parts. The universe was about to become a much more interesting place.